we're going to get started. Make yourself comfortable.
Hi everybody and good evening, and I am Wendy Presco, the founder of NIED, and before I start I just want to thank Carly for putting this on tonight and all the people that are going to be participating, as well as my group of volunteers, because really we have come a huge way, but it's not just me, it's the whole team with everybody's effort. So thank you all of you, and you know who you are, and really those that are not here, I know I thank them every single day. So just to give you an idea of where and how and why I started NIED, I'm going to just read you a bit of a story and then a poem that my daughter wrote. NIED was launched less than 4 years ago, and I am totally in awe and overwhelmed by where we are today. I am here today to speak on behalf of hundreds and thousands of moms and dads, caregivers and families just like ours. As parents of a 30-year-old, who has been suffering with anorexia and bulimia for more than half her life, my husband and I have done everything possible, emotionally, physically, and financially, to provide and help our daughter Amy, and it is never enough. Our experiences of helplessness, frustration, and ultimately anger fueled me to want to create awareness and take action regarding the bizarre and unforgiving world of eating disorders. The pain for sufferers and their families is insurmountable. The stress and strain on families is extreme, horrendous, and devastating. Like so many other parents and caregivers in this country, I have been running a 24/7 do-it-yourself treatment center for Amy. There is no affordable, warm, fuzzy place of healing for her to be in or go to, other than our home and family support. In recognition of the gaps in the current healthcare services, delays in treatment, lack of funding, inadequate information, and education in all levels of government, healthcare professionals, schools, and the public, NIED's ultimate goal is to instill immediate action and change. Over the long term, NIED is committed to ensure eating disorders are acknowledged and included in mental health discussions, policies, mental health organizations, programs, decisions, campaigns, and agendas. We are advocating to gain the same respect, support, treatment, funding, research, and parity as every other physical and mental health illness in Ontario and in Canada. I think it is important that we all understand the reality of eating disorders and the frustration felt by sufferers living with the disease. This should become self-evident as I read a poem Amy wrote in response to a shallow article describing eating disorders as a lifestyle or a passion. My eating disorder is not. It's not a diet, nor a lifestyle, or a senseless teenage phase. It's not stupid, it's not silly, nor the latest weight loss craze. It's not a passion, not a hobby, and it's not a twisted game. It's fatal, yes, it's deadly, it's an illness of the brain. It's not fun and it's not funny, not intentional, not a choice. It kills you slowly every day and overtakes your voice. It's not my fault, it's not intentional, not some spiteful sleight of hand. It's an anxiety-driven, fear-based disease that too few understand. It's not a joke and it's not selfish, it is the furthest thing from vain. It's a drastic telltale of no self-esteem and unparalleled burning shame. It's not malicious nor dismissive, not distinct to middle-class white girls. It's a disease like any other, ensnaring every age, class, and race around the world. It's not uncommon, it's not weird, it dates back centuries, nothing new. It's the single most fatal mental illness which all statistics prove to be true. Telling an anorexic to just eat is like expecting a deaf person to just talk. Telling a binge eater to just stop is like demanding a paraplegic to just walk. Telling a bulimic to just eat normally is cruel, ignorant, and frustrating. Telling an exercise addict to just sit down is like telling schizophrenics to just stop hallucinating. This illness is biological and genetic. It's like cancer of mind and thought. It doesn't come from nowhere. You are either born susceptible or not. If you think this is a ridiculous phase or that we'd be fine if we just tried, then explain to me the shocking rate of sufferers committing suicide. If AIDS were just a stupid choice, or you think that we're just lying, then why are millions desperate for help while millions more are dying? As Amy's mom, here I am, on behalf of NIED, advocating to make changes and bring public awareness for eating disorders, just as Terry Fox and his mom did for cancer. Thank you. And Amy's poem is on our website. It's on the homepage. You can print it out. We've had it copyrighted. So, spread the word.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Carly, and I'm part of the NIED steering committee. And I wanted to do this symposium today because, well, I think Wendy is a perfect example of the impact that eating disorders have on the family, and specifically mothers and fathers. And so I wanted to open it up and mainly give a platform for my wonderful speakers to speak today. So I have three dynamic duos that are going to share their expert opinions on their experiences battling their eating disorders together. So before I do that, I'm just going to go over a little bit of information, and then I'm going to hand it over. So an eating disorder. So when we first get that diagnosis, parents and loved ones are first confronted with this illness, and it pretty much opens up the family and swallows it whole. So one of the doctors, her name is Janet Treasure, she writes this in her book, and she talks about that this is kind of the rabbit hole, right? So it's kind of like this unknown diagnosis. Not many people really know much about it until, unfortunately, it happens to you. So there's a lot of confusion. So why are we here? Why are we talking to parents? So in this frightening and disorienting time, parents and supporters, really, seek to authorities, go to the experts, go to doctors, go to professionals in general, because they're looking for answers. They're expecting to get that guidebook, that dictionary, that atlas to kind of tell them this is exactly what you need to do, and this is how your loved one is going to get better. You're willing to learn the plan, follow the leader, but the first issue is who to trust, because you no longer feel, you're feeling pretty helpless in a lot of cases. So a lot of the initial reactions, there's confusion. So what is this? I don't understand. I don't know. I don't experience these feelings, so it's hard for me to relate to my child right now. Guilt. What did I do? This is my child. I'm responsible. Worry. How is this going to get better? A lot of frustration and exhaustion. So common things that I hear on a day-to-day basis are, what did I do wrong? Give me the answers, how can I fix this? Oh, but she just means she or he is waiting to go to the doctors. We're waiting for that referral, we're waiting for that. So once we get there, that'll be the fix. I really don't understand. We've got treatment in the background, so once we get to treatment, everything will be fixed. But my loved one has everything going for them, so this just doesn't make any sense. She's so smart, she's popular. Oh, it's got to be that person's fault. It's because I put them in ballet. It's because I went on a diet in 1980. It's because I fought a lot with my husband, right? Trying to place blame. And inevitably it leaves us feeling really, really confused. So the message that I really want to get through to everybody tonight is that you don't have to be the only one in charge of curing your loved one. As professionals in the field, we know that this is really hard to treat and to cure, which I don't really know how much I like that term, but this process is a team approach. So if even the most educated and trained professionals in the field have a difficult time treating this illness, how can you expect to do it all on your own? So motivation. This is all about motivation. That was kind of the the title of the talk, right? So the dictionary definition is the active process of giving someone a reason for doing something. So the active process of motivating someone, the condition of being eager to act or work, and the condition of being motivated, a force or influence that causes someone to do something. So there are aspects of this definition that I feel like we can maybe act to help motivate. If we can't completely fix, we can help to act, motivate, or support. So there's some major aspects to consider. We're standing up here and we're talking about eating disorders, and it makes it seem like eating disorders are kind of falling into this, there's one eating disorder and everybody follows these rules and it kind of plays that. That is so far from the truth. There are so many factors that play into how you help someone with an eating disorder and how it feels to struggle with an eating disorder yourself, right? So you're looking at different things like age. There's a lot of different types of care depending on whether you're 9 years old struggling with an eating disorder or you're older, okay? So there's different treatment approaches, and we're not going to have time to go over all of them today, but that's a big aspect, okay? So readiness to change, which I'll go over in more detail on the next slide, but I was talking to some of the panel members before, and they were touching on this, right? So this worked at this time, but I don't know whether it was just because of the time or because it was what it was, right? So you can't, and this is something that I even have a hard time with, but you can't necessarily push someone to be at a different stage than they're ready to be at, which can be very frustrating when you're dealing with a mental illness. Predisposition, so predisposition and comorbid illnesses and eating disorder symptoms. So all three of these things, everybody's different, right? So one person that is 13 years old with anorexia is going to be completely different to the next 13-year-old with anorexia. It depends on what kind of kid they were, depends on a lot of eating disorders, unfortunately, come with other mental illness diagnoses, right? So you're looking at obsessive compulsive disorder, major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress. This makes every situation different that you're handling. I apologize, my back's to you. Eating disorder symptoms. So we know that every eating disorder is going to affect people differently, right? So we have binge eating disorder, we have anorexia, we have bulimia nervosa, we have eating disorder not otherwise specified. I refuse to say the new term, it's too long and confusing, right? So they all fall into different categories, right? So the treatment may be a little bit different depending on what it is your loved one is battling. Availability of care, right? So a lot of this presentation is going to be talking about how it's a team approach, and you need a nutritionist and a psychologist and a dietitian and how many people have access to that? Not many. So that's a big factor. And expert opinion. There's a lot of expert opinion on how to treat an eating disorder, right? Sometimes that expert opinion doesn't work for everybody. Okay, so I'm not saying that the expert opinion doesn't work, but I'm saying that that's one thing that a lot of people kind of fall into. So I did what the doctor said, and my loved one is still sick. So where does that leave us here? Okay. So this is just kind of goes over the stages of change, right? So I put here kind of where's your loved one and where are you, right? Because I see a lot of parents that aren't necessarily ready for the action stage. They're in the pre-contemplation stage. They're in the, well, I don't really think that this is actually happening stage, right? So you can't really support and you can't really work together unless you fully understand what is happening and you fully are willing to see the whole scenario of the illness, right? So as we know, and anybody that is sitting here with a loved one with an eating disorder, when you're trying to get them to see that there's a problem and they're sitting there and they have no intention of changing, either because their depression is too bad so they don't see that they're worth it, or because the illness, one of the key components is that you don't see, there's this big disconnection, right? And so the four of us sufferers were talking just before the event about how there's certain things that we don't remember, right? Because our brain is taken over, okay? So that pre-contemplation stage is really difficult. I would say that the best time to become a part of the team or to help motivate is somewhere between the contemplation and the preparation stage, and of course the action stage, right? But before that, that's where a lot of parents are in the most frustration, I think. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I think all stages come with their fair share of frustration, but I think frustration in different ways. So specialized care. So this is just going over more of what I've already said, right? So eating disorders are one of the hardest illnesses to treat. You talk to any professionals in similar fields, they will tell you that. So it requires special attention to medical, nutritional, psychological, and psychiatric fields of knowledge, right? Because this is an illness that does affect your physical being as well as, psychological and emotional. It makes it very complicated, right? It's almost like everything is working against you. So what we also know is that the illness, it affects all family members, right? So the illness itself thrives on isolation and compartmentalization, right? So we're going to stick to myself. I'm not going to isolate. I'm not going to bother anybody because I'm not worth it. It doesn't matter. All of those feelings, right? Which leads to, you imagine having a family with other siblings in the house. This can be really stressful, right? So I should be able to do this, right? So this is my child. And as a parent now, I do these presentations and it's very different for me because I could definitely feel like I would be on that page too, right? I should be able to fix this. So again, this is a bit of repetition here, but treatment that only addresses one or two or even three aspects of care is insufficient or counterproductive, right? So a lot of people, when they're first diagnosed, they go to see a dietitian, I find, anyways. They sit with that dietitian and they could be the dietitian. So if they're only addressing that part of it, it's not going to be helpful. A lot of the treatment programs out there, some treatment programs out there, their goal is to refeed you to get you to a certain weight and then you're supposed to magically be cured. That's not really addressing all of the components. Okay, so as a parent, how can you be expected to do the job of 5 professionals? So again, remember, you're not responsible for fixing this. So what is reasonable? Support, love, and this is kind of through, I asked for some feedback from sufferers, and this is the feedback that I got. Empathy. So the first thing that I suggest for parents is to get educated. So information gathering, psychoeducation. The more you understand about the illness, the easier it's going to be for you to help. Not only the more you understand about the illness, but the more you understand about what's out there in terms of support, which is kind of why NIED and Wendy has founded this organization. It's reasonable to have tough love. It's reasonable to have, I said tough love, right? Just because you have an eating disorder doesn't mean that there are no rules. That's part of it. Family treatment, there's FCT, communication. Isolation is something we mentioned before, right? It's reasonable to want to communicate with your child, your supporter, or whoever you're trying to support, regardless of how hard it is. And it's reasonable to seek further assistance. So you are just as much going through this as the sufferer in different ways, but the best thing for you to do is to get that support. So again, I was on a little bit of a definition kick. So what does support mean? So to endure, I thought this was really interesting when I actually looked it up. So to endure bravely or quietly, to promote the interest or cause, to uphold or defend as valid or right, to argue or vote for, to pay the cost of, to provide a basis for existence, to hold up or serve as a foundation, to keep from fainting, yielding, or losing courage, and to keep something going. I thought of you immediately, Wendy, to be honest. Like when you say your story, right? And I guess because you're the closest, I don't really talk to my mom about this kind of stuff, so you're the closest mom experience that I know, right? And you're doing all of these things, right? So I guess that's what we're looking for right now. So these are just some quotes, and I won't read them all, and one of them is cut off, but just some feedback from sufferers themselves, right? So I'll read the first one. So that parents need to know it's incredibly hard to admit you have a problem. By the time we do, we are desperate, ashamed that we can't do something so simple as eating. Embarrassed knowing our fears are irrational, wishing there was adequate evidence-based treatment that doesn't kick you out when you screw up. Not wanting to be centered out at family gatherings, that we aren't lying when we describe how we see ourselves, that we don't want to lie about what we've eaten, but we do out of guilt for making you worry. that we don't want to die, we want to escape. That when we're weight restored, the thoughts are worse. And then another one from a parent was, as a parent, how incredibly hard it is to admit when your loved one is an adult that there's absolutely nothing you can do to change the course. If your daughter refuses treatment and is in denial, and that this refusal and denial is part of their disease, you can only tell them that you're behind any recovery and there for them when they need you. Also, how important it is to quickly and weight restore when you have the control, and how helpless you feel. So that was from another parent. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to have the panel members come up. I'd like to make this as collaborative as the audience members feel, so there will be lots of time for questions and comments. Come on up, guys. We'll start getting you organized. So I want to thank all of the panel members for coming. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. I feel badly because 5 minutes or 2 hours doesn't give each of these people enough time to give their stories justice. So I've asked them to condense a very important part of their life. But they're going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to ask them some questions, and then hopefully we can kind of make it collaborative.
No. Sure. Would you want us to start?
Yeah, please.
Well, I'll show you the first one we're starting. Okay. All right. I'm Alex, and I'm part of the NIED steering committee, so that's why I have to go first.
Go take your photo.
Okay. I first got sick in the spring of 2010. Before that, I was a strong, healthy, social young woman who was much more concerned about whether or not I could borrow my mom's car on a Saturday night than what size my jeans were. It started with a seemingly innocent thought about how I could be healthier, and suddenly everything needed to be carefully calculated and monitored based on energy in and energy out. It was as though my knowledge of how to eat and exercise had been written on a dry erase board in my mind, and someone had gone and wiped the whole thing clean. I became depressed and anxious and reclusive, and my physical health rapidly faded. I didn't know what was going on until it was too late. My family was first to insist that I needed help, and when I finally agreed, we went to visit my general practitioner. No one said the words eating disorder that day, but the doctor told me that the waiting list for treatment was really long, and that we should put my name on the list just in case. I wasn't formally diagnosed with anorexia until my first appointment at Toronto General Hospital, where I was admitted for inpatient after what turned out to be an excruciating 4-month wait. I remember the night before my admission, I fainted in the hallway trying to get from my bedroom to the washroom. When I walked through the doors at TGH, I had already made the conscious decision to fully submit to the doctor's methods no matter what. That day was the most terrifying day of my life and also absolutely liberating. Inpatient treatment was really hard, and I could physically feel my brain getting cloudier and cloudier with each day that I spent ill. Hospital-based treatment wasn't the end of the road for me. I didn't walk out of there fully healed, it just didn't hurt to sit down anymore. So I spent the coming months and years living my life without fully thriving, maintaining many pieces of my eating disorder, until I fully relapsed again in 2013. I can't tell you much more about my illness because I've lost a lot of my memories from that time, and my mom can probably do a better job at that. But what I can tell you about is my recovery and what worked for me. After inpatient treatment, I began building my support system for what I now understand is a lifelong journey of recovery. I was lucky enough to start seeing one of the best eating disorder therapists in the country, and I immediately started building a meaningful life for myself, even though I wasn't really well enough to fully experience it yet. I had an apartment, a boyfriend, a career, and I also met Wendy and started volunteering with NIED. All these things helped fill me with genuine joy, purpose, and confidence. And when I did relapse, it was this support system that helped keep my sights set on recovery. In 2013, I was living in Toronto with my sister when my eating disorder symptoms returned tenfold. I felt like I was out of options and I didn't want to return to the hospital, lose my job, my boyfriend, and everything I had created for myself. As a last-ditch effort, I finally asked my mom to take a much larger role in my treatment than I'd ever allowed before. She had always been a believer in the Maudsley approach, which terrified me, because eating and food were the most important things in my life, and I could barely fathom trusting a fully qualified professional to prescribe them for me, let alone my own mom. Plus, I was an adult, and I didn't even live at home. But together we did it. I put my trust in her hands and let her in on the disturbing realities of my illness that I had been protecting her from. I called her when I felt like I couldn't do the right thing or I didn't know how. It was not an easy journey. We spent literally 10 hours creating my first weekly meal plan together, and I was inconsolable the day that she brought a standalone freezer to my apartment filled with homemade pre-portioned dinners. But we did it again and again until it got easier. To this day, I still follow a meal plan as a guide, but it only takes me about 5 minutes, and I do it on my own. It's more like a grocery list. I've also slowly incorporated yoga into my life. I've learned to enjoy eating, and I'm growing to honor my body more and more every day. I could go on and on about the dedication and commitment of my mom and all of my loved ones who walked alongside me in every step of my recovery. My family, my friends, my boyfriend, who's here, and we're engaged now. And I don't even yell at him in the kitchen as much. I'm here today to talk to you about how my mom and I navigated recovery in our relationship, because it truly feels like a thing of magic that we need to share. I'm also here because eating disorders are treatable, and I know that people can heal and fully recover with adequate access to resources. My advocacy efforts with NIED have helped inform and empower my journey towards understanding my own illness. As I work towards recovery, I've also chosen to work toward a society where mental health is taken as seriously as physiological health, and where people don't believe that eating disorders are caused by choice, vanity, self-control, or having a bad body image day after watching the Victoria's Secret fashion show. The current coverage of eating disorders in our culture and in the medical field doesn't represent my struggle, and I want to help change that. I believe that society's misunderstandings have a negative effect on all fronts, from funding for research to training professionals, and I believe that's why there is a 4 to 6 month average waiting list for treatment when people's lives are on the line. So that is why I'm telling my story, why I love advocating with NIED, and why I feel so strongly about reform. Because with understanding and compassion, early detection, and adequate resources, I believe that everyone can recover. I hope you don't say something opposite.
We actually didn't go over what we were going to say, so I figured we don't need to do that probably. Anyway, good evening, everyone. My name is Cindy, and I'm out with Alex's mom. I'm just going to read what I have to say, and it's shorter than Alex's because I was pretty much, told to kind of focus on one main thing that would be very important that has made a difference in her recovery. I'm really happy to be here and supporting NIED as well, and to be given this opportunity to share it with you. What has helped Alex in her recovery, and hoping that it will help others. it really is something particularly that comes to mind, and if I could, I would scream it out at the top of the mountain. As Alex had explained, at the point of her relapse was in the summer of 2013, and is where I feel there was a major change that took place. From the beginning of my daughter's illness, I never stopped reading and educating myself on the subject, literally trying everything I could think of to help support her through the stages. After her following through with the year-long intense hospital program, seeing her therapist weekly, having the support of her family behind her, and as well with the important fact that she really wanted to get better, to heal, and to live a normal life, the struggle still continued. By this point of her relapse, I had felt I had come a really long way with educating myself by this point about illnesses and the different theories for treatment. That day in August, which I remember like yesterday, when she reached out again in so much pain with her back against the wall, was when I first really applied what I had currently been studying. It was emotion-focused therapy, basically EFT, based on the new Maudsley method. It's a breakdown of 5 steps that are consistently used when dealing with the sufferer's emotions. That day, Alex had responded to me, but it was in a different way. It was like he had broken through a very important layer that I had been praying for. A major light went off for me that day, and I feel was the beginning of what became true recovery for my daughter. I had known about the Maudsley approach and even revisited it from time to time, but always felt it was designed for younger sufferers, those living at home, as it involved the refeeding schedule. Although I knew that part wouldn't work for my daughter as she was a young adult, not living under the same roof, I still always agreed with so much of what they described. It made so much sense to me. It was something far above what the hospital program could offer, but such an important part of the equation, I felt. After that, I couldn't study enough about the theory. I took an actual EFT workshop on it as well, so I could practice and understand it inside and out. The parent or caregiver would commit and be there emotionally with the sufferer every step of the way, through all of the ups and downs, being available 100% of the time, using and repeating the 5-step theory that is taught. 90% of our communication would take place over the phone, texting, or email, as my daughter lived away from home. Alex motivated me to do this, as she was responding in such positive ways more and more. It was a trust, a real trust, that kind that she seemed to have to connect with. It changed everything. Bit by bit, she began to open up the true language and torture of her illness. She began to make progress. Small steps eventually led to starting a weekly meal planning schedule again, which she allowed me to do together with her this time. This is something she would never have considered prior. She eventually became weight restored and even allowed me to sit in and collaborate with her and her therapist at pivotal times. In my opinion, emotion-focused therapy was a component of treatment that was applied, along with the rest of the team's support, and most importantly, Alex's will to fight the fight that had become a crucial part in her recovery. It has been 2 years since that day in August where there was a major change in myself, my daughter, and her treatment. Today, she is standing strong in recovery, continuously learning about herself, but truly living a full and normal life.
John?
Amanda?
Starting to think not going first is not a great decision. Something that Carly and Alex both mentioned that I think is really important is that the fact that you don't always remember everything. Because a lot of the details I'm going to talk about, I struggled to think of certain dates and certain times when it happened because I don't necessarily remember. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there before I kind of began because it might be a little here and there, everywhere, and you can jump in whenever if I'm struggling.
I won't correct you.
So I think it started before the diagnosis. Like a lot of people start with the diagnosis and kind of go from there. But I remember being a little girl, and my whole life I felt very self-conscious in my own skin. A lot of my family dynamics were based around it in certain aspects. Like, I think there's lots of comments about like weight and body image throughout like extended family, and I think that just made me realize and become aware of it so early. And when it came to like grade 7 and 8 is when, well, it's in like grade 5 and on, I started to realize that I wanted to change myself, and I did, and I tried very hard. And at first, I wanted to be healthy, and I wanted to try different ways to become a better person or prettier or anything like that. So I started eating healthier and exercising and doing all I could to become better in what I thought was worth something. And I got a lot of compliments, and I was praised and told, oh, like, that's so great, you're eating healthy, and you're looking so good, and all that stuff, and I think that, like, there's no blame in anything, but I think that's one thing that kind of pushed me on, because I thought, well, this is great, like, you know, boys are starting to notice me, I'm being complimented, I'm starting to look beautiful, and that's all I've ever wanted. So that kind of pushed me to continue. And then in the beginning of grade 7, that summer was really rough, and then I went into grade 7. First few weeks of grade 7, it was very different because my school went from like elementary, and then this was kind of like a high school experience in grade 7 and 8. You do Rotary. It was very intense. And I was like, and anyways, the first few weeks were okay, but I wasn't handling it that great, and I wasn't really talking to a lot of people. I felt very awkward all the time, didn't really know how to associate, and I was constantly thinking, and that's all I could remember. And again, like, I don't remember much of those times except that I was always thinking and kind of within myself. I never really noticed a lot that was going around me. I didn't know what it was for, but my parents took me to an appointment with my practitioner, my doctor. And she just kind of talked to us. I remember her talking to my parents and then kicking them out and talking to me, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I went through it. A few weeks later, we were planning to go to Muskoka on Thanksgiving weekend, and they were like, oh, well, you just have a doctor's appointment before. And we went to McMaster Hospital, where I did the same kind of routine. They talked to each of us to get a feel, and I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, depression, and anxiety. And I don't think it was real in the moment. I had no idea what that meant. I had heard my mom talk about people she knew to my dad, and I just thought, like, oh, that's crazy. Like, I don't understand what that is, and that would never happen to me. Like, I can't imagine what that's like. And I remember just hearing the words, and I could not fathom it. And then they said, we have a bed ready, which is unlikely because usually there's a wait. But they admitted me that weekend, and I just remember the first thing I thought is, oh my gosh, now my family can't go to Muskoka. Oh, what a bummer. But I was scared, and I cried, and I didn't know what was going on. Because I didn't understand, I complied. And I was there for a week, and my mom slept there every day. I remember her being like, she's only 11 years old, like, this is, like, she didn't understand either. And she stayed with me for that week, and a week is very short. I came to learn to be in treatment. And after that, I was okay for a little bit. I didn't have any understanding, and I think that's what made it so easy, is I wouldn't be able to tell if I was not doing well or not. Anyways, I carried on for a little bit when things started to get bad, and I would go into weekly weigh-ins, and my doctor realized a weight drop or realized little things, and when I got to the point that I was unstable again, I got admitted, and they wondered, you know, what was going on and stuff, and I still didn't really know how to explain it. I just knew that I was eating healthy, and it felt odd because I wasn't actually eating healthy. I was restricting and trying to change even if I wasn't necessarily aware of it. Matt has approaches treatment with the Maudsley approach, which for some people, it is a really, really great thing. In my family, my entire childhood, a lot of it was that I was a very good student, and I was very well behaved, and I felt like my parents were kind of like the monitors, but I remember just being praised for everything I was doing right. And I think because Maudsley was so family oriented, that's why it didn't work for me. Is because for my parents to have that control where I already felt like I was, being good students for them or being this for them, it just didn't work. And that was the one thing I had at the time, that was the only independence I had. I didn't feel like I had anything of my own. I had an older sister, I had 2 little sisters. It was something for me to have, and for them to be told, oh, well, you're going to control Amanda's food intake, and you're going to control Amanda's exercise, and you're going to monitor her. It just didn't work. We worked with Matt for many years, and I've been in and out many times, and it wasn't working. And I was losing my social life, my school life, my family is one of the hardest things. I have 2 little sisters, like I said, and an older sister. And I didn't really realize how much it was affecting them. There's 4 girls, so that you're saying, yeah. There is. And I didn't realize how much it was affecting them, but it was, and I realized that later on, which I'll get to. So we soon realized, we didn't realize soon, it took a while of constant treatment and trying to find out what would work, until we came to the conclusion that it wasn't, years of going back and forth wasn't working anymore. So we talked to the psychiatrist and the team at McMaster, and they decided I should go away to residential treatment, which, if you don't know, it's a treatment facility somewhere, who knows where, and you are admitted full-time, so you live there. The first one I went to was Renfrew in Philadelphia. I was there for a week, and I lost it. At that time, I think I was really scared, and I didn't know what was going on, and I was really scared for my life, kind of. I think I got to the point where I wasn't feeling safe anymore, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. So I went there, and I was like, there's no monitoring, guys. Like, the parents, they're not looking, and the food is ridiculous, and a whole bunch of different eating disorder thoughts and things that just didn't make sense to them, and they thought, oh, well, we have to stick it through. But luckily, they didn't. And I don't know if maybe it was just a feeling we got, but they brought me home. And I remember making all these lists and plans, and they're like, if you make a list of what you will do at home to be better, then we'll take you home. I did it, and we went home, and I didn't stick to the plan. And things got bad again. Went back to Mac, and they decided on a place that I had heard a few people who I had met at Mac who I call friends, and some of them are very, very, very important to me and great friends now. I had heard of this place called Avalon Hills, and I'm like, oh, well, there's horses, so it'll be a bit better. And I was like, if I have to go anywhere, I want to go there. Avalon Hills is in Utah, Logan, Utah. And I went there a few weeks later. I didn't pack. My parents packed, and I went. And it was really scary. I walked in the door, and 2 people I know, were like, Amanda. And I was like, why are they so happy? Like, I don't understand. And it was really scary. For the first few weeks, I didn't really do much. I just kind of sat there trying to take it all in, not knowing what was going on. And eventually, it started becoming better. At Avalon, I had a therapist, I had a dietitian, I had a doctor and nurses, and various different therapists and doctors that I interacted at the unit. I also lived with, I think, 9 other girls at the time, and it ranged. And it was on like a little ranch in Utah. And I think one of the best things about Avalon is that it got me out of the atmosphere I was living in, and that was what was not working, I think. For me personally, is that being in this place where all I knew is sickness, all I knew is this routine, all I knew is how I was living. This place kind of took me out of it and showed me something new. It showed me I could ride horses if I wanted to. I can become great friends with people. I can do all these things. And it really did help. And I came home 6 months later from Avalon. And I came back and we decided I wouldn't go to school right away because it was in June, and I'm like, there's no reason for me to go to school in June. It was June of I would be going into grade 9 the next year. Yeah. Sorry. Anyways, so we decided I could stay home. You know, I came home like just before my birthday, so in like March, and we were like, you know what, like it's just not gonna work, so I'll just stay home for a bit and see if we can figure it out. And again, it just didn't work. I don't know what it was. Maybe timing, maybe a lot of things, but I just struggled. And I went back to McMaster, and at that point, I had kind of lost all hope. So my depression got a lot worse, and I no longer believed I could be better. I believed I was a burden for my family. I believed I was ruining my sister's lives, and that, you know, they're 10 and 8 at that time, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm ruining their lives. This is how they're being affected. I remember seeing symptoms and behaviors in my little sisters, and it's scaring the life out of me because I'm like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm making my mom and dad unhappy. They're having struggles in their relationship, and many other things that just told me, you know what, like, I clearly can't get better. This has been since I was 11 years old. I'm never going to get better, and that it wasn't going to change, so I kind of gave up. I went to McMaster and basically just sat there. I didn't comply to any of the nurses or the doctors or what they told me, and eventually I refused for my parents to come visit me, and I refused for anyone to come visit me, and I just said, you know, I want to be alone. And majority of that occurred later on as well, and it was kind of something I was doing, I think, to, I was at a very bad point in my life, and I planned to end my life, and if I were to do that, I figured if I hadn't been talking to my family or my parents or people I loved, then it wouldn't hurt them as much. So that's where I was. And because I was not complying, I was refusing to have my parents there, which it was the Maudsley treatment, and so then you needed your family for that to work. They sent me home and kind of kicked me out, basically, even though I was not at a stable point. So, as you can assume, at home was not great at that point. And I went back to Mac. And this is something that I'm very, very, very grateful for, and I still am like in disbelief that ever happened. But I am the first Canadian to ever get sent back to Avalon Hills or any United States treatment because they believe, you know, so we're Canadians, this is a fun little fact, and we're covered, our insurance is covered by OSAP, not OSAP, guys, I'm going to university soon, OHIP, covers, and they have all your history, and if it didn't work once, they figure it won't work again. But for some reason, I remember my dad like bringing me out on the deck and being like, oh, it's on the phone, like you have to talk to them. And I would like talk to them, and she'd be like, you know, ask me this question, and I'd be like, yeah, fine, no, I'm like not, it was, yeah. But for some reason, they decided I was eligible to go back, which I'm so thankful for today, because if I didn't go back, I probably would not be where I am today. So I went back to Avalon Hills, imagine that, and I remember my dad taking me on the plane and being like, Mom wants pictures, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was crying, it was just a mess. And I, again, very lucky, my therapist I had last time requested to have me again, and I was at the point where I still would not talk to my family. So when you first get there, they have kind of little rules, and the one is that you get 1 call a week when you first get there. And the reason they do that is because majority of people will call back, and maybe pull a run for it where their parents come take them home, which is not good. Anyways, I didn't use those phone calls. I would not contact my parents in therapy sessions. I would not talk to them, again, for the reason of like not wanting to hurt them and feeling like I was just a burden. And I was pretty stagnant for like 4 months, where I was just sad and didn't talk and didn't call my parents. And Christmas passed, and I was there with a girl, and she was lovely, but I watched her, and I just felt so bad, because I'm like, you're such a beautiful person and lovely and amazing. Why do you not think you deserve life and stuff? And we talked a little bit, and she never really talked to anybody. And we realized we were kind of doing the same thing. We were like, sweet little dare, call your parents today on Christmas. And so I did. And from then on, it was still crazy hard. And me and my therapist worked through a lot, and I was there for 9 months, working with the horses and working with different people, going to family week where I heard about all of the experiences and getting better and better. I came home before grade 10 in at the end of grade 10. At the end of grade 10, I came back, and I was scared out of my mind. I had a lot of doubt and worry that it would be the same as the first time, and I would, just relapse and things would go downhill. My friend Kelowna, who's here today, she would text me, and I would email my therapist, be like, oh my gosh, like this girl wants me to go to like her youth group and stuff, and I don't know what to do, and she told me just to do it, because I had to get myself out there, and I knew that was the one thing that I didn't do the first time, is I didn't go to school, I didn't try to talk to people, I didn't try to change something. So I went with Kelowna, and I went to her high school in like June or May, and it was the silliest thing, because who goes to high school for 2 months? But it made all the difference, and I picked up a few credits, like careers or something silly that just like would get me in the game for the year coming. But one of the biggest things was there was this drama teacher that she introduced me to and asked if I could hang out with their class. And I remember her saying yes, and I would come in and these people would just like clap for me and cheer me like, yeah, I'm like, I was just blown away, and I was like, I don't understand. But I think that's the big thing that made the difference, is coming back and exposing myself to things I wasn't used to, and getting into school and pushing myself to do the things that were scary, but evidently were going to help me to make sure I wasn't in my own mind and wasn't in my own thoughts. So then I've been at MM Robinson for like 2 years now, and I'm doing very well. And I'm 17, grade 11, and my sister, what? Grade 12. Anyways, I'm just a lot happier than I've ever been, and I'm very thankful for the experiences I've had. And I could talk on forever. And I probably said a lot of the same things and rambled a lot, and bless your heart for not being one to allow me silly. But thank you, and I won't answer any questions, and I don't know where I'm going, but go ahead.
So I'm Dak. And I guess the one thing I'm supposed to do tonight is really share the biggest piece of advice that I can give on our journey with Amanda. And I could probably talk a lot longer than even Amanda did. A piece of advice that I could give out to parents. But I've got one to share with everyone. If you can, or if you want, you can close your eyes, because it's a bit of a story. So it's a little bit about our journey with Amanda. So I want you to picture a 40-foot deep well. The well is deep, dark, and cold. There's nothing in the well except darkness and despair. Once in there, there's no easy way out. Now picture a child falling into that well. They are alone and afraid, and they have no way of finding their way out. They are lost in the well. Now picture yourself as their parent. You stand at the edge of the well, calling down to them. You yell down some encouraging words. You throw them some food to eat. You toss them some blankets to keep them warm. You yell at them to climb out. You throw them ropes. You toss them ladders. You toss them a flashlight. You tell them you have to find your way out. You get your friends and family to the edge of the well so they can try to help too. You plead with your child to get out. And you try everything you can, but still nothing works. Your child is stuck in the well and you can't get them out. And then, as a last resort, you climb down into the darkness of the 40-foot well with your child, and you sit with them and you wait with them for what seems to be like an eternity. You sit without judging. You encourage without demanding. You listen to them before you speak. You don't argue with them. You don't discuss their appearance. You wait and you wait. You make the sacrifice and you wait with your child at the bottom of their well until they are ready to climb out. And when they are ready, you walk with them. You by their side. So my advice to parents is to jump in the 40-foot well with your child and wait for them and support them until they're ready to help climb up for themselves. Don't waste the time doing things that don't work. You can't do it for them with their eating disorder, but you can be with them and support them and make yourself ready for when they are ready to climb up themselves. So what does waiting with them really mean, supporting them? Well, it's giving your child the time they need to find their way. It's to help reduce the worldly distractions. It's to help take them back to the basics. It's not being an enabler and not helping them enable with their eating disorder. It's seeking therapy for yourself. It's telling your friends and family about what's going on. It's taking time for yourself and doing the things that make or used to make you, doing the things that make you or used to make you happy. It's staying in good health as a parent. It's advocating for your child and listening to them and what they're telling you and not arguing with them. And it's even separating your child from their eating disorder so that when they talk to you, you understand who's talking to you. Is it the ed or is it your child? And they respond accordingly. And finally, love them. Do not resent them. They can't help their other acting.
Thank you, guys.
Can I have a tissue?
Oh yeah, I could talk to about this lady here, Carly, for ages though, and she's one of the many reasons I'm where I am today. Go Carly!
All right, my name is Holly. I'm here today because recovered or recovering speakers are important. Education and understanding towards eating disorders and the process of recovery is extremely important for sufferers and supporters of those who have an eating disorder or are in the process of recovery. Get it out. Okay, let's do this. Just emotional. Yes. It's extremely important to hear from those who have been there that recovery or the process of recovery is possible. I was admitted to Credit Valley's, oh shit. I'm literally, I cry every day, I'm so emotional. Okay. I was admitted to Credit Valley's outpatient program December 12th, 2011, and I'm now in my 4th year of recovery. I think it's important. I think it's important to hear from a variety of people who have been there because nobody's story is the same. I know for myself, I felt a lot of shame when interacting with other sufferers because I wasn't sick for that long. I was diagnosed about 7 months before I was put into the hospital. So I didn't really feel sick enough to seek treatment. And I think that's something a lot of people feel no matter how long they have been sick. So the main reason I'm here is to show that recovery is a process, it's different for everyone, and education about eating disorders. And the recovery process is not only for yourself as a sufferer, but for the people around you, and that's vital to one's success. Hands down, the biggest thing that's helped me in my recovery was Credit Valley's intensive program. I was in an outpatient treatment for 7 months, Monday to Friday, 9 to 6:30, and I don't think I would be able to heal without taking recovery seriously, putting it before everything else, and really treating it like a 9 to 5 job that doesn't actually stop 9 to 5, it's all the time. It's still going. The second thing that helped me in my recovery is my parents. They have been here 100% for me, supportive of my recovery. They have been my advocates, helping me find treatment options, understanding the process, and educating themselves on how they can support me and loving me unconditionally. The third thing that helps in my recovery is the girls I met in the Credit Valley program. And one is here today. Eating disorders are extremely isolating. Eating disorders are extremely isolating. And so connecting with other people who are going through exactly what you are going through, and who are as committed to recovery as you are, makes the process very much easier, and gave me an immense sense of solidarity and community, both in my program and through lifelong friends after. I've actually lived with a couple of the girls that I was in recovery with, which doctors don't like that. They don't like that at all. But sometimes it works. So I'm saying, if you have friends who are going through recovery with you, sometimes it's not always a bad thing. Secrets keep you sick, so being with other people who are going through and who you can be honest with is very important. The most challenging thing for me is that society does not understand eating disorders or recovery. A lot of people think you can, when you just get out of the hospital, you're going to be fine. Oh, you look better, you're going to be fine. But recovery is a process that takes years, and not everyone is going to understand that or be supportive. So as much as eating disorders are selfish, recovery is a selfish process as well, where you have to put yourself before everyone else and truly believe that you deserve a life worth living.
I'm the mom. My name's Christine. Shout out to my relatives who are live streaming. Hope you're
Someone
seeing
says, yeah, Holly.
So we were asked as parents, because we knew the girls' stories would be probably a little longer, to focus on one thing. And thank you for your well image, because that is exactly what it feels like, looks like, smells like, all of those things. And the biggest piece of advice, actually there's kind of two. At the first sign of symptoms, get help. Get out there and figure out what's going on. It's not a phase. It's not something they're intending to do. The earlier the better. All the research says that. The earlier you get treatment, the better the prognosis. So get out there and get help. I don't care how many people you have to go see to get the diagnosis, get it. So that's really, really key. And then once you do, and even if you don't, get as much knowledge as you possibly can. And there's so many ways to do that. One of the things that was probably the biggest help is, wow, the new monthly method that everyone else has been talking about. But this book is like our Bible. You can see I've written in it in the margins. I've loaned it to people. I've bought it for people. I've sent it to people. It's probably one of the best books written on eating disorders and how to help people. You can go to group therapy, which we did for I don't know how many weeks, learning dialectical behavioral therapy ourselves, so we understood what Holly was learning in her program. We've done couples therapy, we've read books, articles, attended seminars, attended group support networks for parents at Daniel's place. We didn't go to Sheena's because it's a little farther. It's just so key to be with other people. And then now that Holly has been longer in recovery, another thing that helps me and also helps her, but I'm hoping helps others, is to talk about it. This is not a secret. It can't be a secret because its very nature is secretive. And you need to bust that wide open and not let it be a secret. It's not shameful. It is a mental illness like any other, and it's important to talk about it. So I have two of my really good friends are here, many of my family are here, and we've never hidden this, always with Holly's permission about when to share, but it's never been a secret, and very proud of all these girls to be public. This is Holly's first time in a public forum to talk about it, but it's so essential for this to be recognized by the health profession, by the governments who are funding healthcare, that we can't keep this in hiding. Just so important. So education and get treatment as soon as you can is, I would say, the two biggest things for us.
Just want to thank everybody again. That was amazing listening to all of you. So thank you. We had kind of prepared some questions to kind of go through the panel, but I thought before I did that, because I think a lot of this has actually been covered, I wanted to open it up to questions or comments or
I'm wondering, you mentioned how helpful EFT was for you, and my 19-year-old daughter and our family we're doing a ton of DBT work, and I'm wondering if anybody could speak on the helpfulness or effectiveness of both, or and the differences between the two.
And can you tell us what those acronyms mean?
Emotion focused therapy, I think.
The one that I took and believe in really helped was emotion-focused therapy, but it was actually a course. They call it emotion-focused family therapy is the one that I took. And it's not like, it's sort of based on that book because they talk about the gentle nudging and the different, animal metaphors and stuff. But it's about just, it's sort of a 5-step theory that they teach, and it's hard to explain it all, but it was actually, Carly, you might know too, it was like through Dr. Dulhanty, and yes, they're the ones that brought it here to Canada, right, from Europe, and based on that book, but it's about like being the emotion coach, and not so much the refeeding part. It's about a lot of the things that just this gentleman here talked about too, just being there unconditionally, and but there is a 5-step, that you have to really kind of read and learn. It's not how you think that you'd go about it. It's based on people with eating disorders, but you can actually incorporate it into other behaviors too. Use it with other children in the family, and that it's about like a lot of validation about seeing the need for compassion for sure, but just sort of meeting the need, like no matter what it is, you just sort of recognize it right from the very beginning of something changing in that person, and recognizing it right away, and then there's like 5 steps kind of on how you go about it. But,
so emotion-focused therapy is more about what Cindy and Alice are talking about, is more of a collaborative approach, right? So it's a way of communicating with each other. And DBT would probably be, it's kind of the standard right now in terms of what they're using in the treatment of eating disorders. And so that would be what you would, kind of what sounds like Christine and her husband did, was learn what DBT is so that they can potentially help execute it with Holly. It wouldn't necessarily be something that...
I can talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
It's dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a branch of psychology, if you will. And it kind of talks to both and. So you can be two things at the same time, and that an emotion can be on a spectrum. It's using the word and instead of but a lot of the times. So for example, Holly would say something like, I don't know, what would you say when you were sick?
Or even now, just like,
I'm done with school!
yeah.
Okay.
Like every day.
Right? I can see that you're upset and you're frustrated with school, and you'll get through it. It's not, but you'll get through it. It's, and you'll get through it, because it's acknowledging that this exists and something else can exist at the same time. And it's not either or. It doesn't have to be either or. And it's really helpful. I use it in my daily life, like you said. It's not just for eating disorders. It's a way of being. It's a hard thing to learn, to not use but. It's really hard to not say but. Try it sometimes.
You did that with us too.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, anytime.
But, and, I mean.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a really different way of learning to think. But it acknowledges that things are on a continuum and that two things can exist at the same time. And the reason I think that DBT works is, especially when you're very, very sick, in an eating disorder, your emotions are all over the map. So trying to ask somebody to control their emotions when their emotions are flying around like this.
Or when they're non-existent.
Or when they're non-existent because they've been stuffed. It probably doesn't work.
It's like validating, right? Validating, that giving them.
Well, sure, but trying to ask somebody to deal with cognitive behavioral therapy, like saying, I want you to think about it. Thinking isn't happening at that point. There is no thinking going on. It's all like, it's a mess.
There's no rational thinking.
No. So the DBT works a little bit better in recognizing the emotional side of it, and that two things can exist at the same time, and you're still going to be okay. I mean, somebody may have noticed when Holly was like starting to cry. I said, it's just an emotion. It's okay. It'll pass. That's part of the DBT thing. It's okay. It's recognizing it, and you will be okay.
Someone just wants to know what the title of the book is.
Skills-based learning. It's really long.
Okay.
Skills-based learning for caring for a loved one with an eating disorder. Yeah. So I'll
Janet
Treasure is one of the authors, so I'll leave it here.
Thank you.
So the basis of Janet Treasure's work is basically to teach parents how to be therapists. It's basically what it is. It's teaching you how to be a carer of someone with an eating disorder, which works perfectly if you have the time and the resources to be able to carry it out, right?
One thing I will say though is, I'm not a therapist. I don't want to be a therapist. You still need professional therapy, bar none, 100%.
More questions or comments?
I have one.
Yeah.
I know Amanda, our little Amanda, started fighting this awful thing at such an early age. But the other two girls, it came upon you later in your life. So, so it's not something that you're born with, or like how does this happen?
How does, very good point, right? Because we didn't identify ages necessarily, but Amanda does represent someone that was diagnosed at an early age.
Yeah.
I can probably answer.
I can speak to that as well.
Yeah, it's true. Definitely didn't have specific eating disorder thoughts or behaviors until it kind of came on out of nowhere. But
About what age?
I was 19. So I think I probably started unhealthy thought patterns when I was 18, 19.
Predisposition, though.
But it's like Dr. Woodside says that genetics, load the gun, and environment or something else pulls the trigger. And I think that when we look back and kind of unpacked everything, I had a lot of personality traits and temperament and things as a child that made me a specific way and have certain thought patterns. And it didn't come out with eating and food until much later on.
Red flags.
Red flags, but even it could just be personality stuff. You don't. I didn't do weird things with food.
No, nothing at all like that. It would be more just to quickly add to that. Alex was the type of kid that would, and only looking back now, because if you knew then what you know now, you know that whole story. She just agreed with everybody and would go along with. I remember, and she's close to her sister, who's 2 years older than her. Always has been through life, but even as a young kid, there'd be a joy, and if she had it first and my other daughter might have wanted it, she'd say, well, you can have it, or, that type of thing, or just quiet, in the sandbox, letting everybody pick their own things. I remember specifically, a group of kids coming to the door where she'd always go out and hang out with them, but they were more Jordan's friends, the older girl, and I remember one day her saying, oh, could I just go with my friend? Does Alex have to come with me all the time? And I thought, well, I guess it's true. She could probably, because she really wasn't invited, and she usually went all the time. And here I thought she was going to throw a major fit, because of a lot of kids would, especially at that age. She was probably 5. And, but sure enough, she just said, oh, it's okay, yeah, no, you go, I'll be fine. And I was flabbergasted at how, well, she went around. But it was just small examples like that with the friends, but then also even as growing up as a teenager. And
I was really hard on myself with school. I have really vivid memories of report cards. I remember that in 3rd grade, my report card said that I wasn't a very good independent reader. That I was very distracted with reading, and I was like, gotta fix that. Reading problem. Talking too much, independent reading. But those aren't things that you would think a kid's going to develop an eating disorder. It's just kind of temperament stuff. And then one day, I think studies also show that just starting dieting or having an experience of weight loss can turn on the light bulb and trigger the illness, and that's definitely what happened for me. I had never changed my diet or I started running. I never had an interest in running, and then it just happened.
So it's an anxiety-based illness, right? So I think that also to touch on your point, we do see that there are more cases of diagnosis a lot early, like Amanda's. It very much depends on situations in terms of their predisposition was mentioned in terms of whether you have an anxious child or whether there is research to show that our brains are different. So genetics plays a big part and neurology plays a big part as well in terms of whether you kind of go through with an eating disorder or have other issues in life. It just kind of depends.
Yeah, very much predisposed to an eating disorder in the way that I was a very anxious child. Still am extremely anxious. Perfectionist to a T, to the fact that I would work on a 3-week project. If it wasn't perfect, scrap it all, start again the night before it was due. So I think a lot of those tendencies are common in people who develop eating disorders. At the age of 12, though, I did start dieting. Puberty is a hard time for everybody. And when you're feeling bad about your body and society and other things are telling you, maybe if you fix the way you look, things will be better. So I did start dieting at a young age. Didn't last long, though. And things kind of resurfaced in high school. I had problems with, close friends of mine, boyfriends, a little bit of trauma, and everything just kind of started to spiral in a snowball. Age of 16, 17, trying to lose weight for prom, and summer after grade 12, things just really picked up steam, and went into university when I was 17, and that 4 months, being out of the house and kind of with complete free reign to let my eating disorder go full charge, that's when things got particularly bad, because I was isolated and I could my eating disorder could do whatever it wanted.
So I just think it's important that I mention that the 3 individuals that are sitting up here today suffered from anorexia. That's only one segment. We encourage everyone, all sorts of eating disorders, to tell their story. For some reason, we mostly get people that have had anorexia come up here and share their stories. But obviously, well, not obvious, which is why I'm mentioning it, not all eating disorders look like this, right? So it's not always the perfectionistic kid. It's not always the kid that is so easygoing, right? Sometimes it's the complete opposite kid that's going to get an eating disorder, right? Sometimes the eating disorder isn't as straightforward or, as we see up here. So that is really important to mention. There was another family that was going to come, but unfortunately they couldn't make it, where, her eating disorder started when she was 6 years old. Nothing to do with body image at 6 years old. It's got nothing to do with looking at a fashion magazine when you're 6 years old and you start developing behaviors around food. She also has terribly debilitating obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So, there's lots of different experiences that play into this. Not all are kind of mentioned right now, right? Go ahead.
And that's I think what I was just going to throw in there is, I don't think there's an age or a number or as many outlines as people can say with different things they've grown up as or certain behaviors or personality traits. I've met people from 60, I've met people who are 10, I've met people who have completely different personalities, and I think as much as you can analyze it, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with who you are as a person. I think a lot of it has to do with, it becomes a coping skill like anything. Some people exercise, some people draw, so there's different things, and this is just something that is found in our world that seems to help someone get through something or cope or something they just go to, and it's not necessarily a cookie cutter thing that, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely.
Well, that's why treatment is so difficult, because
Yes, exactly.
it really runs that gamut. There's so many, every single person's story and journey is
So there's no true symptoms that people can look for. There's no real traits.
In terms of red flags?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? But, so there are things that we see more than others, right? It's definitely anxiety is a big thing that we see mostly as kind of across the board anxiety in certain ways. There are going to be things like if you do, for example, if you notice that your child is more self-conscious, or it's a lot of things around self-esteem, or more isolated, or any sort of mental health kind of, if you think about what looks like a healthy person in terms of mental health, someone who's very social, someone who has a range of emotion, those are things that you would kind of want to look for, right?
You all mentioned that it's very important to get continued support. I'm just curious, what is this professional continued support? Is it a psychologist, a dietitian, psychotherapist?
It's a very good question. Yeah. You're making it seem like there's all of us all around ready to help you, right?
Whatever you can get, whatever works best.
It's a combination of things, right? So generally, I think what we find is that Alex mentioned she had the best therapist in the best. Right? So finding someone that works for you, right? So
Yeah.
Is it always a psychologist or a...
it's so anybody with any sort of, I personally feel like they would have to have some experience with eating disorders because it is such a specialty, right? So I've had people work with life coaches, I've had people work with social workers, psychologists, naturopaths, right? But it's that experience with eating disorders, right? Because, and it's the connection, right? So I always tell people, even when they come in my office, you come in my office, you say how I feel, you go home, you think about it, because you may not like me. You need to try more, right? That sort of thing.
Amanda never had a connection at math with anybody, so I think a lot of that, not having that connection with therapists, nothing was working.
But in fairness, she was so young, she
Yes.
might not have been ready to accept it, right?
And Amanda's story, it's important to mention, right? Amanda was young, right? So she's an example of someone in the presentation I was talking about how age determines the different treatment. She didn't have She and the Vandenbergs in general didn't have a choice. They had to. So when Amanda was in MAC, they were told not to get an outside therapist. They were told they had to do what they were telling. And so that's another thing I was referring to when I say expert opinion. Right? So if you go against that, it's kind of like, I had this one family that I worked with where they were told, like, if you take your child out of this treatment that was making her worse, 100% worse, she's going to die. That's what they told her over and over again. What the hell are we supposed to do, right? So, but again, that's where you're stuck with that navigation of what do I do, right?
When we're talking about support, there's really two types of supports that are very needed. Support for the eating disorder sufferer, and there's also the support that parents need, right? Because you can't do it by yourself, so your loved one needs the support, and you can't do it by yourself, so you need the support too. Otherwise, it's too much.
Totally agree. That's why the group therapy stuff that we did, friends, a couple of key friends that you can call and just say, on those days. Very important. Meditation, yoga. Meditation, not and I think it was you that mentioned you have to keep healthy yourself as much as you possibly can, and keep as normal a life as you possibly can, so that when your loved one is ready to re-enter, your life is still kind of as normal as it can be. So keep the routines, don't let the ED take over your life. It's really easy to say that.
But it will. So it
does.
will. And even when it does,
yeah.
On day 5, after spending 24 hours a day monitoring your loved one, you need to take a break.
Yeah.
Because they'll still be there when you get back. If you don't take the break, 5 days turns into 2 weeks and whatever. So you've got to crash.
And I think something, like to talk on my strength, with MAC, because I started there at a young age, as you all said, and that I had adjusted to that group, I had convinced myself thick and thin that these people cannot help me. And I think even no matter what they could do to a point, I was unwilling myself to let them help me.
That's what I meant.
And
That's really
yeah, and I think change is really scary, and change is one of the things that often triggers a lot of behaviors or struggles. But for me, change was something that really, really helped, because I needed to get out of that atmosphere. I needed to get new people who I was open to and didn't know yet. These people I had become so accustomed to that I didn't think they could do anything else to help me.
Someone else? Okay. So I have one comment from online and one question. So the first comment says, thank you for sharing, ladies. My son was diagnosed at 12 with AN, is now 14, and is still in the midst of recovery. I appreciate you all sharing your stories. So many of your experiences resonate with me as a mom. And then we have a question coming in. I'm not sure if one of you will be able to answer. It says, for parents of adult sufferers who are living at home, what are some examples of limit setting you have found helpful in your home so that you're loving and honoring the sufferer, but not enabling the illness?
Good question. I was going to say adults living at home.
Holly doesn't live at home, but has, and comes home for the weekends occasionally, so she's in the home. I don't feel like we have to monitor so much the physical side anymore. Although one thing that I have asked Holly for, my husband and I both have asked, we need to know that you're doing okay. So is it okay, and I always ask her in a permission-based way, is it okay if we check in with you once in a while? So a check-in would be, Holly's recently started taking boxing lessons. Great exercise, good to get out aggression and all that kind of stuff. But one of the questions I ask as a check-in question is, are you sure you're compensating? Meaning, you're expending a lot by doing the boxing. So, and that was an okay question because we've cleared it ahead of time that I can ask those check-in kind of questions. On the monitoring the emotional side, because there's still a lot of anxiety and sometimes anger that comes out. Occasionally, we will have to say, that kind of comment is really hurtful. She has the same permission to say that back to us if we are offside on something, but we have permission to set some of those emotional boundary limits so that we're not hurting each other that way. Do we mess up? Yeah. But at least we've tried to be able to have that language with each other to say that kind of behavior is really not cool. Both sides.
So it sounds like some established guidelines
Yeah.
ahead of time and communication about what those rules would be, which is what generally I see works. But Wendy?
Our case is different from all of you because Amy has bulimia. So living initially with somebody who did have anorexia versus bulimia is like two opposite ends of the pole. So what we've done, and it's really become a system that Amy has asked us to help her do, because with bulimia, obviously having a fridge or a freezer with food, whether it's frozen or not, is a huge issue. So what we've done, and what we've done to help Amy is we've actually put a lock on our deep freeze of the fridge, and I put a lock on my fridge. And Amy has chosen to keep food in the trunk of our car. I mean, it sounds bizarre, but it's what helps her. So when we go out, I mean, the freezer part of our fridge is always locked, because if ever we did go out, whatever was in there, she would binge through and feel her self-hatred would go 1,000 times worse. So it was just much easier and much safer for her to know that she couldn't get in there. And then the other thing with our fridge is when we do go out, we lock it. Obviously during the day it's open and she can take the milk and unfortunately we've kind of learned to live with kind of not a lot of stuff in the fridge, basically. She's a vegetarian. But so I lock the fridge. At night we lock the fridge. Overnight it's locked, so she can't get into it. And then also what she asked us to do was, I used to keep our car keys in the kitchen. So if she wanted to have a night binge, she would come and take the car keys and go into the garage and take what she wanted out of the trunk of my car. And it's her food and she is buying it. It's non-perishable, so things that can't go off. So now what she asked us to do was to keep our car keys in our bedroom, so she won't come into our bedroom to get the car keys. And that's what we do. And it's helped her, and it's just, it is what it is.
And you still need to do this at this point.
Oh my
in her
gosh.
recovery. Wow.
Yeah, she's in
I wouldn't say she's not even, she's in a different phase of, she's come a long way, but her bulimia is still very active at night.
Okay. How long has she been suffering with this?
She's 30 and it's been going on for 16 years.
Oh, wow. So it started in high school type of thing.
Yeah, and you know, like when I think back, like these books and all these kinds of things, I don't even know if they existed like 16 years ago.
Right.
You know, so we were absolutely in the dark. And, you know, if we knew then what we know now, it is what it is. But I just help her on a daily basis like that. And it's working for her and she's comfortable with it. And if she wants something, she'll say to me, you know, can she go and get something out of the car or whatever. And of course, it's hers. I'm not going to stop her.
At her age, doesn't she have her own money? Like, wouldn't she get up in the night and just go to the drive-thru?
She doesn't drive.
Okay.
But what happened was, she lives at home. She's been living at home for about the last, 3 years. Before, when she was living in an apartment on her own, her anxiety would actually make her leave her apartment at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. This kid was walking on the streets of Toronto. You know, it was like scary. So she's been living at home for about the last 3 years, and she has never, thank goodness, done that. And she knows she won't, and we know she won't.
But I think you raised a really good point. Like, I've worked with other people in the past that when the binging, it is so impulsive, and things like, you know, hiding debit cards or locking up food or car keys is a big one, right? So that you can't go out in the middle of the night and do those things are boundaries that I've had other people set as well. because it's a safety behavior, right? It's one of those things that, okay, I feel safer that I won't be able to act on the urge even if I do have it, right?
John, I have a question for you. My name is Lisa, I met earlier. I am a co-founder of an online peer-to-peer support group for parents called Eating Disorder Parent Support. What you wrote made me cry, and I'm a lot like Wendy, I'm a veteran. Would it be possible to get a copy of it? There were 650 families, and a lot of new families, I think, could really, really benefit from your words.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Look at this guy go.
Please always make everybody cry.
What is, did you say it's an online?
Yes, Eating Disorder Parent Support. I do have some flyers here.
Are they on the table?
Yes, I think so.
So maybe we can post it on the NIED website.
On it.
Sure.
We can create this content.
Alex and I work really well together.
Any other questions?
I want to say that each of you shared in a profoundly impactful way. Thank you. Thinking about it from a spiritual vantage point, I'd like to ask, has that been a positive or a neutral or even a negative aspect of your journey? And if you could say something to spiritual leaders, church leaders, about all of this, what would you say that would be helpful?
Wow, that's a really good question, but definitely God is always in our picture. Like we would mention that a lot. Like it's God's will, and we're gonna get through this, and because we are believers and have a lot of faith. So I would pray every day for guidance in being the best supporter I could be for Alex, and I believe that there was a huge amount of strength that came from that, and I'd get answers, and I'm pretty sure that that's had a lot to do with where I ended up getting my knowledge just through having that faith. But as far as giving advice to a spiritual leader for his congregation, what to say, I think it's all part of this is all part of an illness. It's a mental illness. Like we need help with it, and it's to pray for people that are sick with eating disorders as well. When we all pray together, type of thing, and you're saying prayers for people that they'll name that are sick with cancer or sick with diabetes or have died or car accidents, that also my daughter who suffers from a serious eating disorder should be involved. It's all about awareness as well, like and get it out there any way you can. And yeah, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind with that question for me.
Okay. So if you're part of a congregation, right, and there's going to be people that are suffering mental illnesses as well as eating disorders. And everyone's got different experiences with churches, religions, and that sort of thing, right? But a lot of religious groups, they tend to hide things or keep things to themselves. They don't bring it up to the upfront. So I guess my suggestion would be to any pastor or any congregation leader is to talk about it, bring it out into the open, because there's going to be people in the conversation who are keeping it to themselves and are feeling shunned in. And the other comment is from our experience, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and a lot of times it can be through very good therapists and treatment and that sort of thing. But
I think in my case, I have never been really religious, and at the time, I've had family members who would say they're praying for me. And as kind as that is, from my experience, because I was going through so much, that felt like almost an insult, because I was like, how, like, I don't understand this, and it just felt like it was trying to be a fix for something that I didn't think was helping, and I didn't think things were fair in my life, and I didn't understand any of that. So I think it's a really tricky and difficult subject to walk around, and I think for many people I've met, it has been their rock. Like religion has helped them through it all. And for others, it's something that brings them down and frustrates them. So it just really depends on the person and what could be helpful in their circumstance, and also what they've pre-established or the dynamic of the family. Like it's so individual.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just also think that as far as a religious leader is concerned, I think people with eating disorders, like our daughter, absolutely hates herself. The self-loathing that they go through is unimaginable. So I think being part of a sermon or a speech is just learning to love yourself and learning to accept yourself, who you are and for what you are. Because the programs that we've been through with Amy is until she's able to love herself, she can't even give love to anybody, and she won't believe in anything until she's learned to love herself. No, she doesn't believe in anything because she hates herself so much, and she's just a complete non-believer. And I mean, we're traditional, and to try and get her to participate or come with us is just, it's not even a question.
So it's more support for you.
Yeah, and I've asked her, because I mean, we're Jewish, and I've asked her to come and speak to our rabbi, and that he would speak to her any time. And she won't cross the threshold. So so it's very hard to kind of get them to, I think the first thing is for them is self-acceptance and self-love before they can, believe or just believe in anything.
Yeah. Just wanted to comment, as someone in recovery myself, you ladies should all be really very proud to get up and share your story. I think you said it best, Christine, is that secrets keep people sick, and eating disorders are so shameful. And even when they recovered, I've been in recovery since in treatment with Holly, so I've been in recovery for 4 years, and I'm doing really well. And yet, even just talking about it is upsetting. So you should all be really proud of yourselves.
I'm going to add to that. As someone who's known Amanda and her family, this is a special symposium for me too. Amanda, I truly wanted to see her come out of this has been incredible. You would not recognize this girl. This is not the way she was before. And it's been an absolutely amazing thing to watch. John and Deanna have been an amazing family to work with as well. And I'm so proud of you. So we kind of are going to stick around. Myself and some of the NIED people at home to answer.
So I want to thank the parents as well for speaking about your child. It's really amazing, and it's difficult for you guys to be up there. I really appreciate your sharing your personal stories. So thank you.